Hi guys, this is my first YouTube video that's going to be an attempt to do a little bit of teaching and a read aloud today. So I just wanted to let you know that I'll be doing a little mini lesson at the beginning of it, and then we'll be reading the story. To the parents or the support people at home, there is a link that will be in the Class Dojo story that will connect to worksheets if you want to use those. And it's also totally appropriate for you just to take the writer's notebook that the kids have that they brought home on the last day of school and just kind of copy down things in there and allow those to kind of, instead of having to print something out, you can just write the headings or whatever. Or you can do it verbally. If you don't want to print things out, you can just read it and say, is this a simile or metaphor, and go for that. So to get started, we're going to talk about the basics of what a simile is and what a metaphor is. So simile over here, I'm just using my home materials. These are the back sides of covers of scrapbook sheets, and so I'm just using what I have, probably a lot like you. So a simile compares two things using the words like or as. So like two peas in a pod, as sweet as pie, sparkles like a diamond. A metaphor, on the other hand, compares two things by saying something is something else. So they use the word is or was and are or were. She is a fish. They were tornadoes at recess, and I know some kids who've been tornadoes at recesses before. So this little chart I just made to show you the difference between, you can use the same kind of phrasing, but have a different, have it be a simile or metaphor. And so right here, I use the word like, and right here, I use the word are. They are like two peas in a pod. And this one says, they are two peas in a pod. And that just means people are very similar and are good friends. This one, the snow covered the ground like a blanket. Did you hear that signal word? That word was like, and that means it is a simile. The snow was a blanket of white on the ground. That signal word right there is our signal word that tells us it is a metaphor. Yeah, you got it. And she swims as fast as a fish. I want you just to whisper it right now. What is that signal word that we used? You said as, you got it right. And then she is a fast little fish. And that's when we are saying that she is a fish, but we know she's not a fish. We just know it means that she is a fast swimmer. He is as sweet as pie. We've got the word as in there, and so it is a simile. He is a sweetie pie. We know he's not a pie on legs, and so we are saying that's a metaphor because we're saying he is something that he isn't actually. So I have this book called The Bootmaker and the Elves, and this is a book that's set in like Texas or something like that, but this is Cowboy Bootmaker, and you may have read a story similar called The Shoemaker and the Elves that's very similar to this, about some elves that come along and they make shoes in the middle of the night. And this one is for boots, Bootmaker. So The Bootmaker and the Elves by Susan Lowell, and pictures by Tom Curry. Also, my voice is getting a little bit scratchy. I don't know what that's about. I will stop every once in a while in this story to talk about the similes and metaphors that we are seeing or hearing in here. And this is going to be a little bit like a TV show from when you were a little bit younger, and they would stop and ask a question, and then you would say it out loud to the TV. You don't have to say it out loud, but you can just think it, okay? All right, so once upon a time, there was a cowboy bootmaker who was so poor that even his shadow had holes in it. Trouble was, the boots he made were just plain ugly. They pinched so hard that nary a cowboy would buy them. Honey, he said to his wife one day, we are plumb broke. It was true. The bootmaker's wife was, ready to listen to it, as skinny as a snake on stilts. And the bootmaker's own boots were so frazzled that he couldn't strike a match without burning his feet. But he still had enough leather to make one last pair of boots. He cut them out before he went to bed, planning to start sewing the next day. So the bootmaker's wife was as skinny as a snake on stilts. I heard the word as in there, which means it is a simile. Bright and early, he went to the workbench, and his jaw Did I skip a page? He cut them out before he, oh, sorry. But he still had enough leather to make one last pair of boots. He cut them out before he went to bed, planning to start sewing the next day. I lost my place in my head. Bright and early, he went to his workbench, and his jaw dropped clear down to his kneecaps. "Well, I'll be hornswoggled," he cried. "Great day in the morning," gasped his wife, peering over his shoulder. There stood a finished pair of beautiful boots, tall, shiny, and black as midnight. Another simile, as black as midnight under a skillet. Skillet's a pan. The tops were hand tooled with stars and roses, and smack dab on the tip of each pointed toe was stitched a lucky horseshoe. "But where did they come from?" asked the bootmaker's wife. Dazed, the bootmaker just shook his head. He studied one of the boots and saw that every stitch and curve was perfect. These boots were masterpieces. "It must be magic," whispered the bootmaker's wife. At that very moment, a customer moseyed on into the shop. He was a rich rancher, all feathered out in fancy duds and looking for footwear to match. The black boots fitted as though they were custom made. Pulling a wad of money big enough to choke a cow, the rancher paid the bootmaker so well that he went right out and bought enough leather to make 2 pairs of boots. Meanwhile, the bootmaker's wife bought enough beef for a barbecue. Again, the bootmaker cut the leather in the evening, left it on his workbench, and went to bed. And all night long, he dreamed of strange dreams of boots. Next morning, he and his wife peeked into the shop, and there stood not 1 but 2 pairs of brand new boots. "Why, they're as pretty as a little red heifer in a flower bed," cried the bootmaker's wife, all goggle-eyed with surprise. "More magic!" Did you hear that one? That simile? They're as pretty as a little red heifer in a flower bed. Just then a customer banged open the door. He was a rootin' tootin' cowboy from the back of beyond. Yeehaw! This old cowpoke leaned in on his elbow on the counter and said, "I'm wild and woolly and full of fleas and never been curried below the knees. I need some boots." "Mister," said the bootmaker, "I have just the ones for you." He lifted a pair off the workbench. They were high-heeled, knee-high, needle-nosed working boots made out of hairy, spotted calf hide. "Yippee-yee-ow!" cried the cowboy when he found they were a perfect fit. "I'm a wolf, and it's my night to howl. Let her buck. Ow!" He said he's a wolf. Is he actually a wolf? No? So then that would be a metaphor. The buckaroo went swaggering down the street, and soon afterward a new customer arrived. She was the best horse trainer in the whole territory. "I can teach a wild Mustang to turn on a biscuit and never break the crust," she said, "but my boots are worn to a shred." "Ma'am," whispered the bootmaker, "I have just the ones for you." She put them on her feet and smiled. "Delicious," she said. Her new boots had chocolate cow leather tops inlaid with bucking broncos, and the toes were made of lizard skin that glittered like fresh baked pecan pie. I heard that simile. Did you? They glittered like fresh baked pecan pie. The cowboy and the horse trainer paid the bootmaker enough to buy the leather to make 4 pairs of boots. This time, advised his wife, get lots of colored leather too. And so he did. And once again, he cut the leather in the evening and went to bed. And once again, the boots went stamping, jumping, dancing through his dreams. In the morning, the bootmaker rushed to his workbench. Sure as shooting, the new leather was transformed into 4 pairs of cowboy boots. The first pair were 2 giant boots with silver longhorn cattle on the front and golden oil derricks on the back, lone stars on the toes, and yellow roses in between. The bootmaker sold them to a big bow-legged man from Texas. Clump, clump, out clumped the Texan and sashayed in a Rodeo Queen, all ruffles and curls. The bootmaker helped her into a pair of boots made of creamy glove leather inlaid with lavender butterflies and pale pink hearts and stitched in curlicues from top to bottom with sparkling thread. Those boots were so fine you could see the wrinkles in her socks. "Mighty nice," purred the Rodeo Queen. The last two pairs were peewee boots, chili pepper red and sky blue, decorated with suns and moons and rattlesnakes and cactus. The bootmaker sold those boots to a little cowboy and a little cowgirl. Yahoo! They shouted and skipped away. And so it went. Every night the bootmaker left the leather, and every morning the magical boots appeared. And the bootmaker and his wife were in hog heaven. Were they in hog heaven? But they were also mighty curious. Honey, said the bootmaker to his wife one day, why don't we hole up somewhere tonight and find out who's helping us? His wife agreed, and so they lit a candle, hid in the closet, and kept their eyes peeled till right at the stroke of midnight, two cute little critters came tippy-toeing into the room. Pat Grants, whispered the bootmaker. Dat ratted varmints. Shh, hissed his wife. Those are elves. Hopping on the workbench, the elves began to sew and hammer faster than greased lightning. That means they were going super duper fast. The bootmaker rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Watch how they do it, breathed his wife. Scraps of crocodile, ostrich, buffalo, and buckskin flew through the air in all the colors of the rainbow. Fancy shapes and stitches flowered upon the leather. Bang! On went the high heels. Swish, 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 and the boots were polished and set in a row, and lickety-split, those elves were gone. The next morning, the bootmaker's wife said, those two little half-pints are making us rich, but they're running around in the cold without enough clothes to dust a fiddle. They sure look puny, the bootmaker agreed. I know what, said his wife. I'll make them each a brand spanking new outfit. You can make 2 pairs of itty-bitty boots. But before he set to work, the bootmaker sat still as a stone for a long time, thinking. Magical new eyes tickled his brain. He daydreamed about boots, golden boots that sparkled with diamonds, rubies and emeralds, feather light boots that flew on soft silvery wings, and scaly brown rattlesnake boots that hissed and bit snakes in back. Doggone it, he said, I'll put some fancy in my boots too. And he created 4 boots no bigger than a cowboy's thumb. They were velvety as pea pods. Oh, another simile there. I heard that signal word, as. They were velvety as pea pods, greener than a $100 bill, and embroidered all over with a field of lucky clovers. Wow, they're the best boots I ever saw, cried his wife. That evening, instead of leaving leather on the workbench, the bootmaker and his wife laid out 2 small sets of blue jeans, western shirts, cowboy hats, socks, and marvelous miniature money-colored boots. And then they watched and waited. Sure enough, right on the stroke of midnight, the elves scurried into the room. When they discovered their presence, they were pleased as a little dog with 2 tails. Did you hear that simile? Pleased as a little dog with 2 tails. Everything was a perfect fit. Then their tiny toes began to tap, and the elves began to dance and sing. Whoopee-ki-yay! Now it's time to play! They did a little polka down the workbench and do-si-doed among the chairs and 2-stepped round and round a bootmaker shop singing, Yodel-ay-dee-oo! Happy trails to you! Then those 2 little elves scooted their boots right out the door, and nobody ever saw hide nor hair of them again. But thanks to the elves, the bootmaker and his wife stayed fat and sassy ever after, and the boots that he made from leather and dreams were the best in the whole wide West. And that's the end, my friends. I hope you enjoyed reading it. It sure was nice to connect with you today, and I hope that you're having good days and you're practicing reading every day, because that's the #1, reading for 20 minutes. And I hope that you connect with me again, as I will do more read alouds in the future. Mwah. Love you guys. I'll see you soon.